It's 8:15 this morning. You're very welcome along. If you've just joined us, we're turning our attention to football. I'm delighted to say Mark Lawrenson is with us. Mark, good morning to you. How are you getting on?
I'm all good, thank you. You?
Yeah, good. That Liverpool performance, we hadn't seen any real signs of it up to this point. And how important is it just that they got their season up and running effectively?
Well, I think the most important thing is that they win. That was the first thing. Bournemouth were abject at best, but it obviously gives you a feel good factor throughout the club because of the way the results went, etc. But just to win was the most important, and to get back into that kind of pressing mould, which they haven't really done in the first 3 games prior to it.
How as a group do you make sure that the energy, and I guess what I'm wondering is, can you take that performance and use it as a springboard for the rest of the season? Like, because the game's over.
No, I'd say no to that because it was only Bournemouth. But I think just the fact that they've won the game is the most important thing. And it's like anything, in the 3 previous games, they were sluggish. I think in all 3. I think is probably one of the best ways to describe it. And I just wonder. I was at the Crystal Palace game. And they haven't had that long of an off season, and the way that Klopp trains them pre-season, because of all this pressing, etc., is apparently it's a nightmare for the players. It's really, really, really hard work, and I'm just wondering because they didn't have that much of a layoff, whether that's why they've got all these injuries. And these injuries aren't from tackles or anything like that; they're just strains. And I'm just wondering, maybe a little bit. I mean, I'm sure the sports science guys at the club will have something to say about it, but I'm just wondering whether they've done a little bit too much pre-season, if that's possible.
In that instance, at least you would hope that some of those players will start to come back, and they've banked the work, and they'll be able to get back to the level of performance and energy in a couple of weeks' time. So it's nothing terminal. It's just a periodization error.
No, absolutely, it is, and it's just it's just a fact that they've done a little bit too much, and obviously the body's trying to tell them to slow down a little bit. So obviously the introduction at the weekend of 1 or 2 of the younger players, well, that was all good. So hopefully now they've got the foot on the gas and off they go.
Like, obviously there's a couple of days until the transfer market closes, and when they had their centre back crisis during the lockdown season, they signed a couple of makeshift centre backs just as a stopgap. Is the midfield lack of depth at the moment due to injuries? Would that require a same level of surgery over these next couple of days, do you reckon, Mark?
Yeah, I think it's possible. I think Klopp said the other day that they're seriously looking and being active. And of course, you get all sorts of names that all of a sudden come out from all sorts of different places. But I think they want to try and get another body in, most definitely. As to who, I've no idea. And the problem with Thiago is who's the best midfield player that they've got is that he does get lots of injuries, and without him in the team, they're just not the same force. Because you know my love for him. I just think he's brilliant, and he sees things in games that other players just do not see. So I think they're definitely trying actively to get someone in. As to who it is, I've no idea. Well, nobody's got an idea, to be honest with you.
It must be of a serious encouragement that without Thiago they managed to create enough opportunities to score 9 goals in a single game. Like, did you see better creativity from the midfield in particular, Mark, on Saturday, or do the attackers get most of the credit?
I think the attackers get most of the credit, because in the first 3 games, if you look at them going forward, they've not really created that many chances. And that basically comes from midfield, but it also comes from the fullbacks. I think that's the other point that people have been missing in the first 3 games, that with obviously Fulham, Crystal Palace and Manchester United, that they played with wide players to stop the 2 fullbacks getting forward. And it just shows you, when you do that to Liverpool, the amount of chances are created are so much lower, because generally the two fullbacks have got the freedom to just go and play and join in as they're like the wide players, almost as wide midfield players. But clubs have now, and teams have started looking at them seriously and think, well, that if we get there, and play with wing backs themselves or wide midfield players, it's been a problem for Liverpool. So it remains to be seen what happens going forward.
This is going to be the most intense season, I think, potentially ever, given the way the World Cup comes in the middle of it and how long it's going to soak up in terms of the available fixtures. So it's Newcastle midweek, Everton at the weekend, then Napoli, and then Wolves over the next 11 days or so, maybe 12 days.
It's mad, isn't it?
Well, there's no room for mistakes now either, just with the slow start and the way City are going.
No, you just, well, exactly. I mean, people are already saying, there's no way Liverpool can win the league, but obviously they nearly caught them last year. But it is win-win. And it's, I mean, obviously results are always far more important than performances. But, they've had, obviously with the increased performance at the weekend, hopefully that will be the norm for them. And I think within the next couple of weeks as well, that, quite a few of the players that have been missing will be back, but not Thiago. So hence obviously trying to buy somebody else, I think.
Is there maybe we with the way that City have started, right? There's kind of this assumption that they're just going to keep winning and not drop as many points. But maybe even their squad will be tested by the 2 games a week, one of which is the Champions League.
Yeah.
And now everybody understanding, okay, we've got a little bit of tape on City and a little bit of opportunity to see that there are some weaknesses there. You can score against them at least.
Yeah, you can score against them. And what happens if the De Bruyne fella falls over for a couple of months? Which obviously you never wish injuries on anybody, but he's very much the key to that football team and the football club. So, yeah, I mean, listen, what are we? We're only 4 games in. And, teams who started while all the supporters are getting a bit carried away, teams who've obviously had a poor start, it's like, we're going to be relegated. And look at Aston Villa and Steven Gerrard. He got booed off at the weekend. So I think we live in a world where, you're judged by the last game. People don't look at, like 5 fixtures together or anything like that and the difficulty of the teams that you play against. It's just that game. And you know what it's like. If you're a Premier League manager and you lose at the weekend, you're hopeless. And if you win, you're a genius. So somewhere in the middle probably is where we are.
It is a difficult, you bring up Stevie G there, it is a difficult period for him at the moment where the end of last season wasn't great and the start of this season hasn't been great. And his next few fixtures also not great. It's Arsenal.
Yeah,
and
I've seen them.
And then City and then Brendan Rodgers and Leicester. What's going wrong for Steven Gerrard, do you think?
You know what? I really don't honestly know because I spoke to Gary McAllister right at the end of last season and I said, would you be doing much business in the transfer in the, pre-season kind of thing? He said, yeah. He said, but one of the problems is we need to get a few out as well. But he's certainly, he's brought enough players and brought them in. I saw them against Everton and they played with the 2 up front. And obviously they beat Everton. I don't know what it is about them. I'm not convinced about them defensively. Obviously, they left Mings out at one stage, and then the next time he was back in, I think the next game. And I don't know. It's almost like they were looking at him thinking, well, is he the problem? And then all of a sudden he's picked to play in the next game. So it would suggest to me that whoever came in for him, they didn't think was as good as Mings himself. So I think the other thing as well, they just look at them defensively, and I think you can get at them. And that's a worry. And if you're playing with 2 up front, which is very few teams do so, then you're getting a little bit outnumbered in midfield. And I think maybe that might be one of their issues.
With the way that the Premier League is at the moment, he doesn't really have a long time. The stats doing the rounds about Gary Neville's time at Valencia, that comparison has now made it all the way to Talk Sports. Like the chatter becomes almost unstoppable at some point.
Yeah, but the chief exec was at Liverpool, wasn't he?
Christian Perslow.
Stephen.
Yeah,
Christian Perslow. He was at Liverpool with Stephen, so I think that makes it a little bit easier. And am I right in thinking that are they still owned by the Chinese, Aston Villa? Is that right?
2 Americans. Two.
Oh, 2 Americans.
Yeah.
Okay. But you never hear of them. Well, they are. I mean, Dodo here doesn't even know that the 2 Americans own them. So it would suggest to me that they're like very much listen to what Christian Perslow has to say. So I think from Stephen's point of view, that's a definite bonus, certainly.
Okay. The other former Liverpool manager, Brendan Rodgers, their start of the season has been completely overshadowed by the fact that they haven't signed anybody. They're the only team in the Western civilization who hasn't signed anybody at this point.
Yeah.
And it looks like Fofana is going to go again at the very last minute, so they'll have to struggle to get somebody in to replace him. It looks like Tielemans might go. He's certainly available and his contract is running down. And there's still chatter around James Maddison too. Under those circumstances, it's very difficult for him to get the changing room together and say, come on, let's do this. We're all in this together. Because at the moment, they're not.
Well, the other thing is, as well, players are they look at it and thinking, hold on, we're selling all our best players. What's happening? I mean, when you look at them, they've got this unbelievable training ground with a golf course, which has cost them, I don't know, 80, 90 million or whatever. So it's all of a sudden we don't hear from the owner, hear absolutely nothing. And then they're selling all the better players. And you're kind of thinking, what on earth has gone on and what's happened? And in fairness to Brendan Rodgers, after every game he stands up and has his say and everything. But I think underneath he must be absolutely seething because all his best players are going and he can't buy anyone. So, because we don't actually know the internal workings of Leicester City, we're all sort of saying, well, do they need money? Is it the case of the owners are thinking, well, yeah, we've had it great, we won the league, etc. But it's costing us so much money, we don't really want to be involved with it. We need to cut our losses, and that's the only way you can look at it. Because yes, you can sell players. Obviously, even the very top clubs lose top players. So, and Leicester obviously lost and are losing and are about to lose some top players. But you still got to get people in. Otherwise, you're not going north, are you? You're going south. So it's a real tough period for him. And in fairness, I would never have been the biggest Brendan Rodgers fan, to be honest with you. But I actually feel loads of sympathy for him because he's trying to manage with his hands tied behind his back.
I think a lot of people are probably in the same boat, that there's a grudging admiration for the job that he's done at Leicester under the circumstances.
Yeah, no, he's done a good job. There's no argument about that whatsoever. But all of a sudden, how can he do a good job when they're taking his best players away from him? And I mean, I wouldn't mind betting they've had one or two phone calls coming in to take, obviously, the best player, the goal scorer, because, loads of teams would love to take him regardless of the age that he's at. And that would be the end for Leicester, to be honest with you.
Like, it does feel it's that sort of structure around the club and in terms of not being able to sign players, which is going to insulate Brendan Rodgers somewhat from Leicester's poor season, which is probably imminent at this point. Do you think he really regrets now not maybe taking a bigger job last year, if there was one on the table? I'm not sure did Chelsea or Manchester United, if those links were ever really close to happening, but it did feel that if there was ever an offer, that Rodgers felt he was probably in a good project at Leicester and may have stayed anyway.
Yeah, well, I don't think he had any chance of going to the two clubs that you mentioned, most definitely. But the great thing for him was that he was in total control at Leicester in terms of the playing side, absolutely everything about it, and was probably in the off season with just says probably looking at all sorts of players to bolster and boost the squad, probably defensively as much as anything. And it's they let Schmeichel go. I know I think he had a year left on his contract and everything, but that's a strange one because he alongside Vardy, he was arguably one of their best players, if not the best player. So you're weakening the team straight away, and all with losing all the players, especially by the time the window finishes, you seriously weaken the team. Where he's been fortunate, I think, is that the locals or the regular punters who go on to watch Leicester are saying, well, he's got his hands tied behind his back, so what on earth can he do?
One last question for you. David Moyes obviously had a tricky start to the season, and they're very active in the transfer window now over the last 24 hours or so. It looks like they're going to spend 50 million on a player. After the game against Villa, Declan Rice was just saying pure relief. At this point, we understand that this team is better, that the expectations are much higher. So, like that, he needed a win, and they need to kind of use the win against Villa to bounce into the rest of the season.
Yeah. But I don't, I exchanged texts with him the other day, but he wasn't actually worried insofar as, they've lost a couple of games. He was just saying, look, we're getting so many players in and so many bodies, which is what he asked the two owners to do, and they've done that for him. And I would expect them to kick on now. And by the time he gets everybody in, I think they'll definitely be challenging for top six. So, as I say, it's like anything. You don't win a game in 3 games, and you're an absolute buffoon, for want of a better description. But he's not particularly bothered about that, because he's now got everybody that he wants at the club. All singing off the same hymn sheet, Lordy Lar, all those kind of stuffs as well. And whenever I speak to him, he just always says to me, he said, the owners are great with him, absolutely great with him. He said, they're dead straight, and they want top players, etc. And they know what they want to do. And I mean, also as well, I think eventually, and this is only my thoughts, I think they'll look to sell the two owners. And who knows who will come in? You might get another American billionaire coming in. So happy days.
Yeah, definitely interesting times around that place, and the value of the stadium and getting that stadium full week in, week out is
well, yeah, and that deal that they did for the stadium, when you look at it now, was absolutely brilliant. And everybody criticised it, but they did. I think that was Cameron Brady who sort of got that over the line, and that was a great piece of business for West Ham.
Yeah, it has certainly set them up to keep their best players for sure. Mark, great to have you with us. Thanks a million. Cheers.
No worries. Thank you.
It's Mark Lawrenson giving us his thoughts this morning at 8:32. We've